Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's begin the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen a total of 11 topics for a detailed and comprehensive analysis so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, before we start, I have a very important announcement. If you're looking to enroll for Unacademy's online classes, this would be the right opportunity as our 12-month subscription is available at just 19,999. This offer ends tonight and you can avail this discounted price by entering the code IAS English. Those interested, click on the link provided in the video description below. And if you want the PDF of the class, please scan the QR code and join our official Telegram channel. After the session ends, we will be uploading the PDF over here. So let's get started and look at the first topic. On page number 12, The Hindu has published a very detailed article on power consumption in the AI sector. I'm sure all of you must be aware that artificial intelligence, which is being adopted on a massive scale, and the rising number of AI data centers, they are going to significantly increase the demand for power, the demand for energy. And this is one of the most important policy challenges that governments are facing today across the world. As we scale up the setup of AI data centers and the adoption of AI technology into various applications, the biggest challenge to solve, the policy challenge for governments, is to arrange for the energy source, the power supply, to meet the massive surge in power. So, this article gives us some very interesting data and insights regarding this. So, let's dive deep into this topic, and I will take you beyond the article, give you some very important analysis for your mains answers, and cover some important statistics which could be relevant for the prelims exam as well. Now, let's focus on this topic from India's perspective. What would be the expected power surge in India because of the upcoming AI data centers? How can India plan for this? Now, if you look at electricity demand in our country, the growth rate of power demand has largely remained flat at around 5% every year. That is, year on year, the increase in demand for power is approximately around 5%. So the demand as of now has been stable. It's been rising at a very incremental level. Look at the graph that I have shared over here. You can easily understand that the demand for power has been rising at a very incremental level, hardly around 4 to 5% increase in demand. And this is easily manageable for us as of now. We can easily scale up the production capacity to match the rise in demand for power if it is within 4 to 5% range. Now, what if I told you because of artificial intelligence and related technologies, this growth in demand for power can shoot up to 20 to 25% every year, meaning the demand for electricity could jump by nearly 2 to 3 times minimum in the coming 2 to 3 years. In the next 5 to 10 years, this rate, the rate at which the demand for power has been growing up, this could go up 4 times, 5 times as well. So, how can a country like India plan for this massive surge in demand for power, which is expected to come up in the next few years and months? This is the big question that poses a policy challenge for the government of India and for the tech companies, the AI companies, which are looking to set up these gigawatt scale data centers across the country. Now, if you look at emerging technologies, apart from artificial intelligence, the data centers for AI, we have other technologies which are coming up which could also contribute to the rising demand for power. For example, the increased adoption of EVs, electric vehicles, for mobility and transportation. The priority being given for green hydrogen as a clean, renewable alternative. And for producing green hydrogen, you need sufficient electricity to basically split the water atom to produce hydrogen. Then, as well as the adoption of Internet of Things with high speed communication networks like 5G, 6G networks. Today, across industries, even in government buildings, in your individual houses as well, adoption of IoT has gone up significantly. Today, AI enabled IoT is being deployed across various sectors in the economy, which helps in industrial automation, home automation, where different devices, appliances, machines are all interconnected. And they're interconnected through high speed data links, through 5G, 6G networks. So these new technologies will drive up the demand for power in the coming months and coming years. So, how can a country plan for this? Because, see, today, India has nearly two times the number of internet users as compared to Europe. Were you aware of this fact? Compared to Europe, the number of internet users in India is nearly double. But however, when it comes to AI data center capacity, Europe is much ahead of India. The installed AI data center capacity in Europe is nearly 10 gigawatts. These gigawatt scale data centers, they're often measured in terms of the power they consume. Whereas in India, the installed AI data center capacity is just around 1.4 gigawatts. Now, what does this data tell you? It tells you that though we have twice the number of internet users in the country, the AI capabilities in our country has been very limited until now. But going forward, given the plans of the government, given the upcoming projects of the big tech companies and the AI startups in India, we will see a complete shift in this scenario. India is very keen on setting up these gigawatt scale AI data centers across the country, and they will single handedly contribute to a massive jump in demand for power in the next 2 to 3 years. So, this is exactly what India has to prepare for. According to projections, which has been certified by the Niti Aayog as well, by 2027, this demand for data center capacity is going to jump 2 to 3 times. The installed data center capacity would increase nearly 2 to 3 times the next 2 years alone. And by the end of the decade, you might see a five-fold jump in India's data center capacity. So, compared to the current capacities we have, in the next 5 years, we might see a five-fold increase in the AI data centers in the country. Now, the big question is, why do AI data centers consume so much power? What is so different about them? How are they different from your traditional enterprise servers? If you look at the current IT infrastructure, even now you have data centers, right? Which are basically a storehouse of data. The current data centers are primarily used for data storage. And you have these traditional enterprise servers, which are helping in storing the data, retrieving the data in data mining and data analysis. Now, how come AI processing is so different compared to the traditional servers and the computing infrastructure which is already present? Please understand, AI data centers are completely different from your traditional data centers. Your traditional data centers, they only store data. They help in storing, retrieving data, processing, and mining the data. But AI data centers will be performing complex computations, which is going to be energy intensive. Now, AI data centers will be powered by GPUs, the graphic processing units, for which companies like Nvidia are known for. Look at Nvidia's market capitalization today. It's nearing $3 trillion, which is almost the size of the Indian economy. There are other upcoming chip based companies which are producing GPUs. And you can see the prospects and the stock prices of these companies. that tells you the future prospects of AI and the rising demand for GPUs. These GPUs are power hungry chips. They require massive power, not just to run the computations, but you need cooling solutions as well to maintain the temperature levels. So, the requirement for computation power and cooling solution, this is what is going to shoot up the demand for electricity. Now, you take a GPU rack, an entire rack of GPUs which are assembled in an AI data center, their cumulative power consumption is in the range of 80 to 150 kilowatt. Now, when you compare this with your traditional enterprise servers, you know what is their power consumption? It's hardly 15 to 20 kilowatts. Look at the difference. Nearly 5 to 10 times is the difference in power consumption compared to your traditional enterprise servers and your GPU based AI data centers. So this is where the shoot up comes with regard to power consumption. Not just for the computation heavy chips, but also for the cooling solutions that are necessary. So this is what countries are preparing for. So what India can do is we should learn lessons from other leading AI powers like US and China. China has made rapid advances in terms of its AI infrastructure. If you look at China's power consumption, which has shot up, it is quite shocking. China has seen a 25% year on year growth when it comes to demand for power, which is primarily driven by the demand for power from AI data centers. The CAGR is 18% as far as the annual growth rate in power demand is concerned. Because see, China has invested heavily in generative AI capability. It has set up multiple gigawatt scale AI data centers. And China's experience offers a lesson for India. China had initially made a plan. According to the plan, China was supposed to consume around 400 billion kilowatt hour by 2030, by the end of the decade. But they have already hit this number in 2025 itself, according to the latest data. China's data center power consumption has already reached 400 billion plus kilowatt hour in 2025, 5 years ahead of the projected target. Now you look at United States. Currently, US has the most number of AI data centers. Almost 51% of global AI data centers are located in the United States, in places like Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio. These are some major data hubs which are coming up in the United States. And these data centers are not only being set up by US government agencies, they're also being set up by the big tech companies, from Apple to Microsoft to Google to Meta. So the kind of facilities they are investing in is honestly massive. It's unimaginable. The kind of demand for power which is coming up, they're not even considering the usage of grid electricity. They are considering setting up their own power plants. They're setting up dedicated power plants to power one AI data center. That is the scale at which power is required to run these AI data facilities. So the experience of US and China offers some key lessons for India. Now in India, where are the data centers located? When you look at AI data centers, the gigawatt scale data centers, where are they coming up? Recently, Reliance Industries has announced a massive AI data facility which is going to come up in Jamnagar in Gujarat. As you know, Reliance Jio is one of the leading telecom internet service providers in the country, which is going to roll out AI based apps and features as well. So, Reliance is setting up one of the biggest AI data centers in the country in Jamnagar, Gujarat. Then, Google has recently partnered with the government of Andhra Pradesh, and it is going to set up a gigawatt scale data center in Vishakhapatnam, the coastal city of Vishakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. Apart from this, there are many other AI data centers coming up in Bengaluru, in Pune, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Delhi, NCR region. So all these are going to be hubs of AI data centers in our country. For example, in Bengaluru, on the outskirts of the city, the government of Karnataka has recently announced a massive AI data center facility. Mumbai currently is the hub of data centers. because this is where most of our submarine cables land. Same with Chennai as well. Even in Chennai, you see significant data center capacity, because these are the two places where the submarine cables, the underwater cables that bring internet, that land in our country. So massive data facilities are located in Mumbai and Chennai. So even here, AI data centers are likely to come up. So how will India account for this massive transition that is happening? Plus, India has the AI mission, the India AI mission. The government itself is scaling up the base infrastructure. The government itself is procuring the GPUs and creating the GPU stacks, which can be usable by the AI startups in the country. So, all of this will significantly shoot up the demand for power. So, how will you match this demand? You can't rely on thermal power, you can't rely on traditional grid based electricity for this. Because to run these data centers, you need 24/7 power supply with no interruption. So, do you think our current public providers or private discoms, do you think they can provide such uninterrupted 24/7 supply? They need to ensure the base load is maintained. 100% are existing discoms and private companies, they can't maintain this kind of power supply. They're not able to meet the existing demand in our cities. I'm sure all of you must be suffering from the frequent load shedding, which is carried out by our discoms and the power distributing uh, entities. So they will never be able to provide for the massive surge in demand for power that comes from the AI industry. So we have to think of innovative solutions. And more importantly, we should move towards clean energy. Given the demand expected, you can't rely again on fossil fuels. You can't rely on thermal based power, coal based power, and fossil fuel based power. The focus should be on clean, renewable energy. The companies, governments are very conscious about their goal to decarbonize the economy to meet their climate goals and climate targets. That is why there is a shift towards cleaner, renewable forms of energy. Now, if you suggest solar energy or wind power, the problem is they are intermittent. When you look at solar and wind, they are not ideal for powering AI data centers. You know why? Because they are intermittent. It depends on the weather conditions, depends on the location, depends on the topography of the place, the climate of that particular region. And you need massive storage solutions, meaning you have to invest in battery technology to store the power that is generated. But this is not enough to maintain the base load, and you can't provide uninterrupted clean supply for these massive AI data facilities. So solar and wind is not the right way. It's not the right way to go. So most experts across the world and all companies, governments, they are looking at nuclear energy. They are considering green hydrogen as well. They are considering geothermal energy as well. But right now, the most important focus is on nuclear energy to power these AI data centers. In fact, some companies are already experimenting with this idea. In California, in Texas, in Virginia, US tech companies, the big tech giants, they are trying to experiment with their own nuclear reactors. They are tying up with nuclear vendors to set up small modular reactors, a dedicated power plant, a nuclear power plant, a miniature nuclear power plant, which can power the AI data centers. So, this is being seen as the future because this can provide for clean energy. The power would be uninterrupted, and these reactors are proven to be relatively safer. Of course, there are some challenges in implementing these small modular reactors and in dealing with the side effects, the consequences of it. But if governments have the right policies in place, the right regulations in place, then small modular nuclear reactors could be the solution to power the future of our economy. So that is what we learn from this important article. Now, what are these small modular reactors? Where does India stand with regard to SMRs? Recently, in the 2025 budget, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has announced the nuclear energy mission, which prioritizes small modular reactors in the country. The government has given a dedicated outlay of 20,000 crores for the nuclear energy mission. And the government has set a target of achieving 100 gigawatts of installed nuclear capacity by 2047. And a large part of this is likely to come from small modular reactors. The Baba Atomic Research Center is already pioneering these efforts. It has developed the Bharat Small Modular Reactor, a 200 megawatt pressurized heavy water reactor, which contains a very small quantity of radioactive uranium, slightly enriched radioactive uranium, which can be used to generate up to 200 megawatts of power, which is more than sufficient to power an entire AI data center. It can even power small townships, small industrial clusters. So imagine, instead of having these massive power plants, imagine having a decentralized network of small miniature reactors at every tech park, at every special economic zone, at every industrial cluster. One SMR is enough to power these facilities. And this would be clean energy, relatively safer, because the technology has really matured, it has really advanced. Of course, there are concerns about the handling of the nuclear waste, how the nuclear waste will be handled and processed. How will the safety, the security of nuclear material be ensured? These are, of course, the biggest concerns and challenges because there's always a possibility of a nuclear accident or radioactive leakage. But of course, if these concerns can be addressed, then small modular reactors are the future to power AI data centers. Now, India is looking to amend some of the existing laws to simplify the regulatory framework. The Atomic Energy Act of 1962. Under this, the nuclear sector was nationalized. It's just the domain of the government and the public institutions. So India is looking to make a space for private participation as well. And we are looking to bring our nuclear standards to match with global international standards. So India is looking to amend the Nuclear Liability Law, the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010, to align with IAEA safeguards and IAEA standards, which can bring in up to $26 billion of private investment into our country into the small modular nuclear sector. There are European companies, American companies which pioneer in this technology. So we can have a mix of indigenous small modular reactors and few foreign vendors who can supply the technology to India as well. So this can really help scale up the installation of these reactors in the coming months and in the coming years. So very soon, BARC is expected to set up the first functional small modular reactor. And in the next 5 to 6 years, India has a target of having five indigenous small modular reactors which can go into full operation by 2033. So India is looking to set them up in the next 5 to 6 years, make them fully operational by 2033. And along with that, attract some foreign investment and private capital to set up small modular reactors in the country. But the question is, how safe are these small modular reactors? As I told you, the technology is pretty mature today. Since we have pioneered the large nuclear plants, safety, security has always been a top focus and priority. Plus, you have a global organization, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has imposed these safety standards and security standards, which are mandatory for all the nuclear powers to follow. So, as a result, the technology related to small modular reactors is pretty advanced, it's pretty mature. And the possibility of an accident or a incident taking place is relatively low compared to, let's say, other sources. And if at all, let's say, an accident were to happen, you can't rule out. Of course, you can't say it's 100% foolproof. Maybe a natural disaster could trigger a radioactive leakage, or maybe terrorists might try to attack a small modular reactor because it would be much more easier when there are hundreds of small modular reactors. It would be much more easier to attack them. So, in cases or incidents, the damage would be largely contained because the nuclear material, the radioactive material in these SMRs would be of a very small quantity. And enough redundancies can be built into the system to ensure it is foolproof. And the core size is very small compared to your large nuclear plants. Now, for example, if you read about Chernobyl, the Three Mile Island incident, or Fukushima nuclear disaster, those were mega disasters because it involved a large nuclear facility where large quantities of nuclear material was used, and the core of the reactor melted, resulting in large scale radioactive leakage. But if such incidents were to happen with a SMR, you will not see such kind of damage and impact. It will be largely contained and mitigated because, first of all, the technology is very mature. The core meltdown incidents are almost nil or almost impossible to occur. And if at all such a tragedy were to occur, the consequences would be highly minimized because of the relatively less radioactive material which can be found. And adequate safety measures can be built in with proper regulations to ensure that these small reactors are absolutely safe, not just for human safety, but for environmental safety as well. But of course, the challenges will remain. For example, these small modular reactors, they would be built in these factories. They would be prefabricated and they would be just installed or set up on the site. So it's like, for example, how your cement bricks are made, right? All prefabricated material, how it is produced in factories. They're mass produced on scale and they're transported to the site and just installed, plug and play model at the site. Now, when this model is followed, this has some advantages. It will bring down the cost when you don't have to build everything at site. You can have one factory where it is produced. It will use the benefit of scale production, and you transport this to the required site and install it. Installation cost is always cheaper. Cost wise, it will be more effective, but there is always a risk when you're transporting nuclear reactors. Imagine, by road, by rail, and there is always a risk of an accident or a theft of nuclear material or a terror attack on these reactors. Safety security risk will always remain, and this is where there needs to be adequate legal regulatory framework, not just at the national level but at the global level. So right now, global SMR regulatory reforms are being considered. The IAEA is leading these efforts. International Atomic Energy Agency is setting the standards for small modular reactors. In fact, the IAEA conducts a forum. It has been holding the SMR Regulators Forum so that from across the world, nuclear regulators can come together, share their expertise with each other. The IAEA has already laid down the global standards for these small reactors, and some countries have even brought out legislations which are in line with IAEA standards. For example, US has passed the Advance Act. Canada has the vendor design review. UK has a regulatory sandbox, which ensures adequate regulation of small modular reactors, keeping in mind the safety and security standards that are required. So India can look at the global experience, draw some lessons, work with IAEA, which is part of the United Nations, which works closely with UN Security Council, UN General Assembly, and ensure that our laws and regulations align with these global set of standards. So if India can do this and overcome these implementation related challenges, then small modular nuclear reactors can be the solution to match the massive surge in power demand, which will come from artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, green hydrogen, and as well as from Internet of Things and 5G, 6G networks. So, this is what we learn from this important article. The safety risk would be maximum during transportation, during installation, as the nuclear material would be on the move. So, if this can be taken care of, and if nuclear waste can be scientifically managed, if it can be stored safely, for this, if proper regulations and legal measures are put in place, then SMRs will be the solution to address the energy problem. So, based on this, take up a mains practice question. AI data centers are energy intensive when compared to traditional enterprise servers. That is the first statement which has been given. The question then says, how can small modular reactors address the challenge? That's the second part of your question. What are the associated advantages and challenges? So, in total, it's a three-part question. First, you have a statement about AI data centers being energy intensive as compared to traditional enterprise servers. Second part is focused on small modular nuclear reactors being the solution. And the third part is asking you the advantages and challenges associated with these small modular nuclear reactors. Now, all you have to do is break down your answer so that it can do justice to all the three questions which are part of this topic. Now, in the introduction, you can paint a picture about the rising energy demand because of AI and other critical emerging technologies. Provide some data that we have discussed. Talk about maybe China's experience or how power demand in US has shot up because of AI data centers. To point out how AI based power consumption and power consumption to critical emerging technologies will lead to a massive surge in demand. So create the question here. I mean, create the challenge, the policy challenge, highlight this in the introduction itself. This poses a significant challenge for governments and policymakers. How will you match this demand? And you can't rely on fossil fuels. You need to focus on clean, renewable energy. So present the policy challenge and then in the body, explain why AI technology is so power intensive. That explanation has to be given. You have to compare GPUs with your traditional enterprise servers. Compare traditional data storage with AI based data centers, with the gigawatt scale data centers. How are they different? Why is power consumption so massively different? Bring out this comparison. And then you can suggest the solutions from solar to wind to geothermal to green hydrogen to nuclear. Present all the options. Yes, all the options can be considered, but the most effective would be nuclear technology. Small modular reactors would be the most effective solution. So explain why. Why small modular reactors can easily address this challenge. Then talk about the advantages involved and the challenges involved with it. That's it. Your answer is almost done. Then provide a conclusion. In the conclusion, you can you can stress upon the upcoming fusion between AI and nuclear technology. This is a necessity, right? No country can avoid this. The upcoming fusion between these two sectors is obviously going to happen. So be supportive of this idea, be optimistic on this idea, but do point out the safety, security related concerns and why there should be caution, why there should be strict regulation, proper legislative framework, and international cooperation. Always stress on safety and security when it comes to nuclear technology, but encourage the adoption of the technology to solve the problem. So this shows that you're solution oriented, but you are also risk averse. I mean, you know the risks that are involved and you have an idea how to mitigate those risks. That shows that you're a problem solver, but you acknowledge the challenges as well and how to deal with those challenges. So this will make for a good structure. I hope this answer writing approach that we provide is really helping you to improve your answer writing skills. So if it is beneficial, please let me know in the comments so that we can continue with this on a regular basis. Now let's look at the next article. We have an important editorial related to tiger conservation. See, this article won't take much time. Tiger conservation has always been seen as exclusive to the protection of tigers. This has been the general approach of the conservationists in the country. The government as well has believed that for tiger conservation, we have to keep humans as far away as possible from the tigers. Now, you look at Project Tiger, for example. You look at the approach taken by National Tiger Conservation Authority, which implements Project Tiger. You know, under the tiger conservation strategy, there is a model, a core buffer model of conservation, which is implemented. Under the core buffer model of conservation, a core area is identified, which is the primary habitat of the tigers in these protected areas, in the tiger reserves, and any human settlements they are evicted from the core area. Now, the challenge is in these tiger habitats, right? That space, the dwelling space is cohabited by humans, by tribal communities, by scheduled tribes, some of which can be particularly vulnerable tribal groups listed as PVTGs. These forest dwelling tribes, the indigenous communities as we call them, what about their traditional rights? What about their land rights, their livelihood rights? When you're evicting entire villages, pushing out forest dwelling communities out of the core area to protect the animal, aren't you violating human rights? Aren't you threatening the tribal communities and erasing tribal rights altogether? This has been a persistent question when it comes to tiger conservation in the country. So recently, the Tribal Affairs Ministry has announced a new policy. It has pushed a new policy which calls for the cohabitation of tigers with the tribals. Instead of an exclusive approach, which is often pushed by Environment Ministry and the conservationists, Tribal Affairs Ministry has pushed a new policy for tiger conservation that is without evicting the tribals, without evicting the villages present in the tiger habitats. Can we still achieve tiger conservation? Can there be better conservation, in fact, when there is community involvement? This is the question being debated here in this editorial. We have studied in our previous classes. When it comes to biodiversity conservation, involvement of local community, seeing the local community as a stakeholder is extremely important. Any exclusionary form of conservation, where only the government is driving the conservation effort and excluding the people out of it, that approach has never worked. Not just in India, around the world, when governments have tried to conserve forests, protect biodiversity by excluding the local people, that strategy has always failed. If you want to achieve genuine conservation, you need to harmonize the synergy between the local community, use their traditional knowledge, and use that, apply that for conserving the forest and biodiversity. Because from centuries, forests, ecosystems, they share a, a symbiotic relationship with the local communities, the forest dwelling tribes. Because, see, please understand this point. Anywhere in the world, you go to Amazon, you go to African equatorial forests, or look at the tribal communities in India. Tribal population has always respected nature. They worship elements of nature. They treat the animals with respect. They treat elements of nature with great respect. They revere them. They know their livelihood is dependent on them. They never exploit or over exploit. Their exploitation is sustainable. They live a sustainable livelihood. And in turn, they protect and conserve their forests and their ecosystems. That includes the flora and the fauna as well. So, so today's approach of the governments to protect forests and biodiversity without including the local population, it has no logic. Because for true conservation to happen, you need to make use of traditional knowledge, which is already present with indigenous tribal communities. Plus, in India, we have a legal provision, the Forest Rights Act of 2006, that recognizes tribal rights, indigenous rights. It recognizes the land right of the forest dwelling tribal communities. So, how can you just evict them to set up a tiger reserve and to protect tigers? Yes, it is important to protect the tiger population because without Project Tiger and the success of NTCA, probably tigers would have been driven towards extinction by now. By 2005, India barely had 1,600 tigers. Today, we have nearly increased that number by 2.5 to 3 times. Credit does go to Project Tiger and the efforts of NTCA, but the problem is it has been an exclusionary approach. The editorial calls it the fortress approach. This has been the approach that has been taken by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, National Tiger Conservation Authority, and the state forest departments. So under Project Tiger, what they have done, they have always believed that the only solution to save tigers is to create a fortress. And the idea was to set up tiger reserves as these protected areas, identify the core and buffer areas, protect the core and buffer areas with different regulations. And in the core areas, evict all the villages, even if traditional communities are present who have resided here for centuries. They are being pushed out of the forest, they are being evicted. And there is a complete ban on human activity in the core zone to protect the tiger population. This is the fortress approach. Yes, this strategy has worked, but it has worked at the exclusion of the tribal community. I hope you're getting my point. It has worked to the disadvantage of tribals. So, what about tribal rights that are guaranteed under Forest Rights Act? What about their land rights? What about their community rights? What about their right to access forest resources? Tribals depend on forest resources like minor forest produce. They collect the fruits and berries. They practice very basic subsistence agriculture. They, they rely on the resources of the forest for their sustenance. So, through this eviction, you're taking away those rights. That's why the Tribal Affairs Ministry is pushing for this new idea that we should see the local communities as a stakeholder in protecting tiger reserves, in conserving the tiger population of the country. So, this approach is appreciated by the editorial as it strikes a better balance between the rights of the tribals and the need to conserve and protect a threatened species such as the tiger. Yes, tigers are solitude creatures. They're very sensitive to changes in their environment. It is a good idea to restrict some human activities. So you should restrict over tourism, you should restrict deforestation, you should restrict industrial activities. But that does not mean you exclude tribal population, which are the native communities, which actually have traditional indigenous knowledge of how to conserve the forests, the prey base, and even protect the tigers in turn. So seeing them as stakeholders is the new policy approach the Tribal Affairs Ministry is pushing. That is what you need to learn from this particular topic. So please take up a practice question based on what we have studied. The new tiger conservation policy pushed by the Tribal Affairs Ministry rightly sees people as stakeholders and not as trespassers. Evaluate. Coming to the next topic, there's a very big development in the world of geopolitics. US President Donald Trump held a very high profile meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea at the APEC summit of the APEC countries. US and China had a very high profile diplomatic event. For the first time since 2019, Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping. It had been more than 6 years since the two leaders had met. I'm sure you're aware of Trump's policies towards China. Trump has seen China as the enemy number one. He has waged a trade war against United States, against China's economy. Both are locked in a geopolitical rivalry. Both see each other as military threats. They're worried about each other's nuclear arsenal and military modernization as well. So tensions have remained very high between them. And there are allegations of covert, covert operations and sabotage by both the sides, where China allegedly is trying to sabotage American interests and US is trying to sabotage Chinese interests. So during this period of heightened tensions, such an important meet between Trump and Xi Jinping holds a lot of significance. And they've actually seen a breakthrough. Trump has announced a reduction in the tariffs that were imposed on China. China was facing a tariff of 57%, a total effective tariff of 57% for its exports to the US. So this was likely to take a significant hit on Chinese exports into the US. And some of the tariffs, 20% of these tariffs, was a penalty the US had imposed as it accuses China of supplying the raw materials, the chemicals that are needed to produce a deadly drug, a deadly opioid known as fentanyl. Fentanyl is a highly addictive opioid, which has become the leading cause of drug related deaths, overdose related deaths in the United States. So US is dealing with a massive social problem with drug addiction. And The consumption of fentanyl in particular has shot up. So fentanyl is mainly produced in Mexico, in South America, in Central America, and then trafficked and smuggled into the US. But US accuses China of supplying those raw materials. US allegation is that China supplies the chemicals that are needed to the drug cartels in South America and Central America, which are using them to produce fentanyl and then they are smuggling it into United States. So US had levied a 20% penalty. So this penalty is now being brought down to 10%, effectively reducing the tariffs to 47%. Now, this is a sign of a thaw in the relationship between US and China. Now, if you observe, you will notice that US tariffs on China has reduced below that of India. What's the tariff Trump has imposed on India? It is 50%. The only other country with such high tariff is Brazil, which also faces a 50% tariff from Trump. So if US is reducing the tariffs on China to lower than that of India, I think you can draw the lesson from that. You can understand that the relationship is seeing a slight improvement between the two countries. China had retaliated against these tariffs. China had stopped the procurement of soybeans. I hope you know soybeans play a very important role in Chinese cuisine, in Chinese diet. Whereas US is one of the largest producers and exporter of soybean, and China was the biggest importer of American soybean. So China used its leverage. It had stopped the import of soybean to hit American farmers, who are a major political base, a vote base for Trump, especially in the more rural areas and conservative states in the US. Farmers constitute the primary vote bank of Donald Trump. So China took direct aim at Trump's vote bank by stopping the import of soybeans. Now, both countries have resolved this standoff. China has agreed to resume the soybean imports. China will be procuring 25 million tons per year, and it's a 3-year deal they have agreed to. So for next 3 years, China will fulfill this obligation. It will procure 25 million tons of soybean, which is going to benefit American farmers. So this is a trade-off that they have achieved, essentially a compromise of sorts to tone down the tensions between them. China had retaliated by restricting the export of rare earths. China had placed global restrictions on the export of rare earth elements into the US. As you know, rare earths are very critical for many industries, from defense to aerospace to electronics industry, semiconductors. Across industries, rare earth elements are absolutely crucial. It's seen as a strategic mineral. And China controls and dominates the supply chain of rare earths. It has a near monopoly over the mining, processing, refining, and distribution of rare earths. So recently, China had retaliated against American tariffs by placing a restriction on the entry of Chinese controlled rare earths into the US market. It had mandated all its partners, including India, to not supply any technology or material which might consist of more than 0.1% of rare earths from Chinese controlled supply chains. Now, China has agreed to lift this restriction. China has reached a deal with the US to remove this rare earth export restriction, which will facilitate the easy supply of rare earths to the American market as well. These are some big breakthroughs that you see. And there are reports that China might consider buying energy from United States. Trump himself has posted about this on social media that China might buy oil and gas from the US. Because don't forget, China is one of the largest energy importers in the world, just like India. And United States has massive oil and gas reserves. Not just the shale reserves it has, but in Alaska, US has hydrocarbon reserves. So most likely, China will soon finalize a deal to procure some oil and gas from US as well. So they've reached a mutually beneficial agreement, fulfills each other's interests, which will benefit each other economically, and they are toning down their tensions as well. So what is the lesson for India from this? One important lesson One important lesson India should draw from this is that Trump's policies are more of a blackmailing tactic. I'm sure all of you will agree with me on this assessment. We have seen this repeatedly with Trump. He announces something so radical that it will create a shock effect. For example, he announced that there would be massive tariffs on Canada, massive tariffs on Mexico. He would announce the suspension of trade agreements. These are measures deliberately designed by the Trump administration to have the shock effect, to push the other side on the back foot, and then appear to negotiate with them, talk with them, or arrive at a so called compromise, which would largely favor American interests, American economic interests. So you've seen this repeatedly with the policies of Trump with many countries, be it with the trade deal US signed with UK and European Union, the trade deal US has signed with Japan, South Korea, with Philippines and Malaysia as well. It's the same approach, exact same policy that Trump has followed. So the 50% tariffs on India is not supposed to be a real tariff. US doesn't want to continue with that. It's more of a blackmailing tactic to shock India, to pressurize the Indian government, to push India on the back foot and force India to concede where it matters to American economic interests. Right now, you might have heard US India negotiating a trade deal, a mini trade agreement. So US wants to use this tariff as a blackmailing tactic and pressurize the Indian government to make concessions in sensitive sectors like agriculture, in animal husbandry industry, in MSME industry as well, where American goods and products can flood the Indian market. But India can never make such a compromise. We can't open up sensitive sectors like agriculture, MSME. This is where millions of people are dependent on for their jobs. And we can't allow the flood of American products, which could decimate our domestic producers. That is the dilemma India is facing. But there is a key lesson. A way out of this crisis is to make some concessions for Trump. And India also can exercise some of the leverage it has. Maybe promise some energy imports from US. Anyways, India is an energy importer, right? Today, energy prices are pretty stable and it is on the lower end. So we can diversify our energy supplies, procure more oil, gas from the US as a trade off. We can procure more weapons from the US. India needs advanced weapons to modernize its military. And India, US already have a close defense partnership. We have procured a lot of American weapon systems. Maybe we can scale this up, offer this as a trade off to protect core sensitive industries like agriculture, MSME, and the others, and ensure that we get some relief with regard to the 50% tariffs. That's what China has done. They have given some concessions to please the ego of Donald Trump and to suit America's economic interests. In return, they have got some concessions back. So, this is a key lesson that you can take away as to how diplomacy works and how leverage is used in geopolitics. The other important lesson is that the Quad might be becoming irrelevant. Now, this is a matter of serious concern for us. This is something that worries India. Now, what is the Quad? The Quad has been a diplomatic alliance of India, US, Japan, and Australia focused on stabilizing the Indo Pacific. The main objective of Quad has always been to enforce rules based order in the Indo Pacific, uphold international rules. This was an indirect message to China to keep China under check, to control Chinese aggression in the Indo Pacific. So, for India, Quad was a pivotal platform to counter China, keep the diplomatic pressure on China. Later, Quad was diversified as well. Today, it deals with economic collaboration between these four partners, deals with technological collaboration, disaster management, vaccine development, etc. The Quad has become a diversified group. But according to India, it remains very, very vital for stabilizing the Indo Pacific, mainly to counter China, to keep that diplomatic pressure on China. Now it appears that US might be trying to strike a separate deal with China. Experts call this the creation of a G2, like you have G20, G7. The possibility of a G2, the two greatest powers of the world, the two most powerful countries coming together to form their own power block, working together, dividing the world into different spheres of influence. These are colonial era type of policies. During the colonial period, we had seen the world being divided like this between different colonial masters. You might have studied in history, in world history, how Britain, Portugal, the French, they basically carved out spheres of influence, dominating those areas without bothering the other global power. Such sort of a deal might be considered by US and China. Such a proposal was made once in 2009 by then US President Barack Obama with the then Chinese Premier Hu Jintao. They had considered the idea of US China working together, where they come to an agreement that we will not disturb you in these areas, you don't disturb us in these areas. Together, we will dominate the world. A duopoly, establishing a duopoly like a cartel, running the world like a cartel, dividing the world between themselves, creating some red lines that they won't cross, and retaining their dominant position. Now, this is never good for a country like India. If Quad is undermined, if multilateral platforms are undermined further, if sort of alliance comes up between US China where they carve out their spheres of influence, this will directly undermine Indian interests. Such a proposal was considered once in 2009, but it didn't go through because after this meeting between Obama and Hu Jintao, tension started rising between the two countries. They were looking to work together in the field of climate change, in the field of trade, in the field of nuclear proliferation. But as the geopolitical tensions and rivalries increased, the idea fell apart. Though the term G2 has never officially been used, US or China, they've never officially used the term G2. This is a reference by experts. Experts call any possible collusion between the two superpowers a G2 sort of an organization, an informal alliance between them, where they carve out the world into spheres of influence and retain their dominance, run the world like a duopoly. It's like, for example, look at our telecom sector, right? Two companies have a duopoly in the Indian market, and I'm sure you know which these two companies are. Both of them will retain their areas. They have a subtle agreement between them, not formal agreement, but sort of an informal understanding, and they maintain this dominance on the market. It will only benefit them, it will never benefit the consumers actually. So, a similar duopoly arrangement in geopolitics could be disastrous for Indian interests. India believes in multilateral approach. India believes in a diversified power center in the world. But if two major powers cement their power position, come to a compromise between them, that could be a backset for India. Clear? So that is one analysis that we take away from this meeting. Next, Donald Trump will never go out of news. He has announced something shocking. He has announced that Pentagon will immediately resume nuclear testing. Donald Trump has erased one of the important red lines. The world is inching closer and closer towards a potential nuclear tragedy, or at least a nuclear arms race getting kickstarted again. And the blame lies with Russia, blame lies with China, and the blame lies with the United States. All the three powers are equally responsible. I'm sure you are aware Russia has recently tested some of the most devastating nuclear powered and nuclear enabled weapons. It has tested a cruise missile, which we spoke about in the previous class, the Burovesnik, a nuclear powered, nuclear payload carrying cruise missile. And they have tested an underwater drone called Poseidon, a torpedo, a nuclear powered torpedo operated autonomously like a drone, which can cause a radioactive tsunami. If it is detonated along the coastline of a big city, it can unleash a radioactive tsunami on the city. These are some of the most destructive, powerful nuclear weapons ever built. So Russia has tested both of these platforms, the Burovesnik missile and the Poseidon torpedo. Plus, China, which has no arms control restrictions on it, has accelerated its nuclear weapons program. Though it has not carried out any recent tests, it has accelerated the stockpiling of nuclear material and nuclear warheads. And China has sufficient delivery systems, very sophisticated, mature delivery systems, which can easily pose a threat to United States. So as China, Russia have accelerated their capabilities, United States has also decided to resume nuclear testing. The last time US tested nuclear weapons was in 1992. After that, it had adopted a moratorium. It had placed a self-imposed moratorium on itself, and it had signed the CTBT, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Even Russia, China are signatories to it, but none of them have ratified it. They're not bound by the obligations of CTBT because they have not ratified the treaty. They've just signed it. So China has reminded US of its obligations and its moratorium, but even US has to share part of the blame. It was Donald Trump who withdrew US from the INF treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was an arms control treaty between US and Russia. So the START and the New START treaty, which was there, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, is also expiring, and there is no possibility of this being renegotiated. Right? And US and Russia, they're at the opposite ends of this discussion, and they're not willing to renegotiate the New START treaty to place some restrictions on their strategic weapons. So, with US immediately deciding to resume nuclear testing, tensions could easily heat up. This could trigger a new arms race, and you would be one mistake away, one miscalculation away from a possible nuclear disaster. So this has started alarm bells across the world because the three major powers are accelerating their nuclear program with a possible resumption of nuclear testing. Next, there is some relief for India from the US. India has got a 6-month waiver from Trump's sanctions on Iran for the Chabahar Port project. Now, this is another big development. Some relief for India at least. See, the Chabahar Port is a very important strategic initiative of India to create connectivity, to link with Afghanistan and as well as Central Asia. In 2005, India tied up with Iran, invested heavily in building the Chabahar port, which is strategically located here near the Hormuz Strait, close to Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman, which is a major shipping lane for shipping oil and gas. So the port terminal, the Shahid Behesti terminal at Chabahar port is operated by an Indian company. So with Iran, we have established a trade link with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a landlocked nation, and India will never have access to Afghanistan because of Pakistan. Pakistan would not give us transit access. We can't rely on Pakistan's transit access. Though we technically share a border with Afghanistan here at the Wakhan corridor, this actual border doesn't exist as Pakistan has occupied this territory from India illegally, which is Pakistan occupied Kashmir. That includes your Gilgit Baltistan, which would have given a direct link for India. Now that this territory is illegally occupied by Pakistan, the only route to connect with Afghanistan is via Iran. So India developed the Chabahar port, invested in the road project in Afghanistan, the Zaranj Delaram highway, and we were supposed to be part of a railway link, the Chabahar railway project with Iran. And we had signed a trilateral agreement in 2017. A trilateral agreement was signed between the three countries, between Afghanistan, Iran, and India, to operationalize the trade route, which would further connect and extend with Central Asian countries. India could connect with Central Asian countries which have very close ties with us. They are blessed with resources, so we could harness their resources through this possible trade route. But when Trump became the president for the first time in 2018, Trump had withdrawn US from the nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and he had targeted Iran with crippling sanctions. Since then, Iran has been suffering from the impact of American sanctions, and back then, India had agreed to follow these sanctions, though it was unilateral sanctions. Generally, India does not follow such unilateral sanctions. But given the pressure exerted by Trump on the Modi government, India had fallen under American pressure and India agreed to cut off oil imports from Iran. And in return, we arrived at a compromise. The compromise was Chabahar port would be exempted from these sanctions. Port operations at Chabahar port will not be hit with these American sanctions. That is, if India cuts down oil imports, we zeroed out oil imports from Iran. That's why Iran was angry with India. That's why Iran dropped India from Chabahar railway project. But the compromise was Chabahar Port would not be affected by the sanctions, so India can continue to use Chabahar Port. These sanctions were in place, it is currently effective as well, but the waiver is something that we got in 2018. This exemption, this lasted until 2025 September. Recently, the US State Department announced that this waiver is going to end. The State Department announced the waiver granted to India for utilizing the Chabahar port. This exemption would come to an end, meaning the Indian project would come under sanctions. This would have restricted the ability of Indian companies to operate at Chabahar or make use of the Chabahar port. Now, thanks to the slight improvement in India US relations, the US has agreed for a 6-month extension on the waiver which was granted for the sanctions on Chabahar port. This is a big relief for India, meaning we can now continue to use the Chabahar port for 6 more months at least before a final deal is arrived at. And we can use the Chabahar route to provide essential supplies to Afghanistan. Now that India-Afghan relations are improving with the Taliban, India can send food aid, essential supplies and materials to Afghanistan through the Chabahar route without worrying about the impact of American sanctions. So the sanctions which were being brought into full effect, the exemption which had been taken away, this waiver is now extended by another 6 months. Next, the government of India, which is facing a lot of criticism over the Great Nicobar Island project, it has defended its proposed initiatives at the National Green Tribunal. As you're aware, under the Great Nicobar Island project, Government of India has planned several strategic projects of great economic and strategic significance. India is building a transshipment port, a brand new international airport, a power plant, and an entire industrial township. Transform the Andaman Nicobar Islands into an economic strategic asset of India. But this mega project has raised serious environmental and social concerns. Because as you know, Andaman Nicobar is part of one of the biodiversity hotspots. It's blessed with great biodiversity. For example, threatened species such as the leatherback turtle. Leatherback turtle is listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. Then you have the Nicobar megapod, avian species, which is also listed as threatened, as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. So, environmental activists, social activists, the civil society, representatives of tribal groups, they've all voiced their concern because environmental clearance has been granted for this project. Now, this has been challenged at the National Green Tribunal, and the government has strongly defended its position. The government has said it has taken into account all the environmental social consequences and it is going to mitigate the impact. The government has said it's not that we are not aware of the environmental social consequences. We are aware of it. The government has conducted a thorough scientific assessment and study, and it has made plans to minimize the environmental social impact. Now, for example, the social impact is that indigenous tribes like the Nicobaris, which has the scheduled tribe status, and the Shompen, which is a particularly vulnerable tribal group. These communities might face some displacement, but the government already has plans to rehabilitate them and compensate them. The government has said this project will only take a small amount of area, accounting for hardly 1.8% of the total area of the Andaman Nicobar archipelago. And if you just look at the Nicobar Island group, the Great Nicobar Island group, just around 18% of Great Nicobar area would be utilized for this project, and over 2/3 of the remaining landmass would remain as protected forests. Government is saying that there is no such massive threat for the environment. Yes, there will be some amount of deforestation, some amount of displacement of tribes. There will be some impact on the coral reefs. There will be some impact on threatened species. But the government has said it has a plan. It has a conservation plan in mind which will be implemented. For example, the government has already identified 20,000 sensitive coral reefs, which might be affected by the project. And 16,000 of these coral reefs will be translocated or they will be relocated. And another 4 to 5,000 coral reefs, there will be actively monitored by the government to conserve and protect them, to minimize the impact of these projects on the coral structures. So these plans are part of the government's proposal. The government has said that according to the environmental and scientific assessment, there are 51 nesting sites of the Nicobar megapod which might face the threat. Out of these 51 nesting sites, some of them might get destroyed by the project. The government is acknowledging that. And the remaining nesting sites will be protected and conserved. And the government already has a conservation plan to protect the Nicobar megapod, which is a vulnerable bird species. Similarly, the leatherback turtles, which are going to be threatened by the project, some of them will be translocated, some of them would be actively monitored, conserved, and protected, with greater focus coming in from the government agencies. The government has said that we are not blind to these concerns. We are aware of it and we are actively addressing them. We have a contingency plan to deal with the impact. But we can't derail the project because of these concerns. Because this project will be a strategic national asset, an economic asset. So we have to go ahead with the project, but we will take care of the environmental social consequences. That's the position of the government of India at the hearings which are going on at the National Green Tribunal. Next, India has said it is ready to help Afghanistan, the Taliban run Afghanistan, with its hydropower projects. Now, this comes in the backdrop of the visit of Taliban's foreign minister, Amir Khan Mutaki, to India. See, India has already built a hydropower dam in Afghanistan, which is the Salma Dam. When India was closely working with Afghanistan over the last 2 decades with the Afghan civilian government, India had invested in many projects, up to $3 billion worth of infrastructure projects. We had built the Zaranj Dilaram highway. We built the Kabul parliament, right? India built hospitals and schools. We had also built the Salma hydropower dam that you can see here in the map, located in almost central and western part of Afghanistan. So this is an India funded project constructed by India as well. On similar lines, India is now showing willingness to help Afghanistan with hydro projects. Now, this is possibly a message for a likely involvement of India in the upcoming Shatut Dam, which Afghanistan is looking to build on the Kabul River. Now, this has great significance. Why? Because Kabul River, which is part of the Indus Basin, is seen as a lifeline for Pakistan. It flows into Pakistan in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and these parts of Pakistan, they're dependent on the flow of the water from the Kabul River. Recently, after the Taliban Pakistan clashes, Taliban has said it will block the flow of water. Taliban has said it will cut off the flow of water into Pakistan. So the hostility between the two sides and Taliban statements that they will block the flow of water, they'll build the Shatut Dam, has already raised alarm in Pakistan. Now, upon that, India is saying that we will help Taliban with the construction of hydel projects. We have not mentioned which project, but it appears that India is keen to get involved in the Shatut hydropower dam, which would help provide water supply, manage water for Afghanistan, especially in Kabul. But this could have consequences in Pakistan. Pakistan is already alarmed by India's decision to suspend the Indus Water Treaty. India is planning new projects and upgradation of existing projects on the Indus Basin, on Jhelum, Chenab, etc. This has already raised alarm bells in Pakistan. So, in that context, this development becomes important. So, let's watch this particular space for more developments, but please take note of this statement from India. Next, India is going to add 6 gigawatts of wind energy capacity in this fiscal year. So, this is a big jump because in the last fiscal year, we had added around 4 gigawatts of wind energy capacity. Compared to that, in the current fiscal, India will be adding 6 gigawatts of wind energy capacity. So this is seen as a big milestone. by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Because see, India has an ambitious climate target, right? We have a stated goal under the Paris Agreement that by the end of the decade, we will have half of our energy coming from non-fossil sources, right? The target set is 500 gigawatts. And according to reports, we are already close to achieving the 500 gigawatt of installed capacity from clean renewable sources. Now, out of this, the goal is to have at least 100 gigawatts coming from wind energy. That's the goal the government has set to at least ensure wind energy contributes around 100 gigawatts of energy in the coming years. We already have an installed capacity of 54 gigawatts. This is the installed wind energy capacity in our country. Another 30 gigawatts of wind projects are upcoming. So what does this mean? Very soon, India will have 84 gigawatts of installed wind energy capacity. And I'm sure you're aware, we are looking to scale up offshore wind projects, especially coastline of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu is the most ideal for offshore wind projects. India has recently signed partnership agreements with UK and other European countries to help in offshore wind projects. India wants to promote indigenization of wind turbines and the components needed for these wind farms. In fact, there is a framework, the approved list of models and manufacturers wind framework brought out by the government of India, brought out by the Ministry of New Renewable Energy to support indigenous production and manufacturing of wind turbines and components. This could transform India into a global hub, a manufacturing hub of components needed for wind energy. And currently, the states which are the leading wind energy producers are Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and of course, Andhra Pradesh. These three account for more than 50% of the total wind energy produced in the country currently. So, the statistics I'm giving you is important for your prelims. Please make a note. These three states, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, account for more than 50% of wind energy which is produced in the country. So at this rate, India will very soon achieve its target of 100 gigawatts of installed wind energy capacity. And we want to scale up offshore wind power projects to ensure that we make a clear shift towards clean renewable energy. Now, coming to the prelim section, three small articles. Let's quickly wrap up the session after this. The Nauradehi Wildlife Sanctuary is in the news. Madhya Pradesh has announced that Nauradehi Wildlife Sanctuary will be the third protected area to house the African cheetahs as part of the cheetah reintroduction project, which is a pet project of Prime Minister Modi. As you know, India has imported cheetahs from African countries like Namibia and South Africa. Right now, they have been introduced at the Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh. They've also been introduced at the Gandhi Sagar Sanctuary. As of now, these are the two areas where the cheetahs have been reintroduced in the wild. One at Kuno National Park, the other at Gandhi Sagar Sanctuary. The third site which was chosen is Nauradehi in Madhya Pradesh. So Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister has confirmed that a new batch of Namibian cheetahs, which are being brought from Africa, they will be introduced at the new site in Nauradehi in Madhya Pradesh. The other chosen site is Shagad in Rajasthan. These are some of the selected sites for the cheetah reintroduction plan. So there were already two sites, Kuno National Park and Gandhi Sagar Sanctuary. Now Nauradehi would be the third sanctuary where cheetahs will be reintroduced. Next, on page 5 and 14, we have an advertisement, we have an article related to one of India's foremost leaders, freedom fighters, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Today, the 31st of October, is his birth anniversary. And by the way, this is the 150th birth anniversary of the Iron Man of India. The government has designated the day as Ekta Diwas since 2014. Since 2014, we are celebrating this day as the Day of National Unity. It's a tribute for the contribution of Sardar Patel in building the Indian Union post partition. Sardar Patel is credited with the efforts to unify India, to bring together more than 500 princely states, convince them through concessions, negotiations, sometimes through threat and coercion and force as well. For example, the integration of Junagadh, integration of Hyderabad, where Pakistan was meddling. The role of Sardar Patel and the then Prime Minister Nehru was pivotal in ensuring that these parts became an integral part of the Indian Union. So, in recognition of this contribution of Sardar Patel, the day is marked as Ekta Diwas, or the National Unity Day. So, there's an article written by the Union Minister of Culture and Tourism, Mr. Gajendra Singh Shekhawat. He talks about initiatives of the tourism ministry, such as Ek Bharat, Shresht Bharat, which promotes the spirit of unity. It promotes the exchange of culture and tradition and art from different parts of the country to unify the nation despite our diversity. Since childhood, you would have heard of the statement unity in diversity. How, despite being such a diverse country, religiously, culturally, linguistically, ethnically, still we are able to come together as a unified nation, as one political entity. And credit for that, large part of that credit goes to leaders like Sardar Patel. The tourism ministry also has a campaign, Deko Apna Desh, which encourages domestic tourism, encourages Indian youth to travel to different parts of the country, to appreciate different regions, languages, culture, and the art forms, so that you develop the spirit of brotherhood and fraternity, which instills the spirit of unity. Look at schemes like Swadesh Darshan, the Prashad scheme for pilgrimage. They're all designed to promote national integration and national unity. So these schemes of the tourism ministry, they not only help drive tourism and economic activities, they actually instill the spirit of integration and unity. That is what we'll take away from this article. Coming to the last topic for today, a defense related topic. India is conducting a massive tri service military exercise, and it has shaken our neighbor Pakistan. The Trishul exercise is a tri service military exercise involving the Army, Navy, and the Indian Air Force. And it is being conducted along the international border in Gujarat and Rajasthan that faces Pakistan. Specific exercises have been planned in the disputed Sir Creek area, where Pakistan has been taking some aggressive posture against India. Sir Creek is not only a standing dispute, but Pakistan has been trying to create trouble by pushing more infiltration of smugglers, possible infiltration of terrorists. It has stepped up its military infrastructure as well at Sir Creek. So recently, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh spoke about giving Pakistan a befitting reply if it carries out any misadventure at Sir Creek. So in the same area, the tri services are conducting a massive military exercise. What is curious is that the exercise is being opened by the Indian Navy in the Arabian Sea and the Sir Creek Theatre. You know what does this signify? It's a very symbolic message which is going out. The message to Pakistan is that during Operation Sindoor, Pakistan saw the full-fledged assault from Indian Army and Indian Air Force. The Navy largely remained silent, though it was operationally ready, though it played a deterrent role. It was not operationally deployed. Reports indicated that India was all set to engage in naval action as well if necessary, if the conflict escalated. So Pakistan has not tasted our naval might. So the message going out from Trishul exercise is that we are letting Pakistan witness the naval strength, the naval might of India right in its own backyard. So this exercise has attracted a lot of global scrutiny, global attention as well. It is being seen as a provocative step from the Indian side. Pakistan has criticized India. It has even closed the airspace across the Karachi Sir Creek sector. And Pakistan is closely watching the tri-service exercise Trishul, which is being conducted very close to the international border. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope all the topics are clear. And if you liked the session, enjoyed the class, do let me know through your likes and comments. That is it. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.